You can support In the Past Lane with as little as $1 a month. Just go to the support page at our website, inthepastlane.com. Thanks. The luck of the Irish. We've all heard that expression countless times. But have you ever stopped to think about it? Why would the Irish, a people who, until recently, had suffered through 1,000 years of invasion, colonization, exploitation, starvation, and mass immigration, why would they be associated with luck? Well, the phrase actually originated in America, not Ireland. And it was at least partially a put-down. During the gold and silver rush years in the second half of the 19th century, a number of people who struck it rich were men of Irish and Irish-American ancestry. Over time, this association of the Irish with mining fortunes led to the expression, luck of the Irish. It suggested that the Irish who struck it rich did so not because of smart decisions or hard work, but rather pure, dumb luck. In other words, luck of the Irish originally meant achieving success in spite of laziness and stupidity. You are listening to In the Past Lane, the podcast about history and why it matters.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more
to huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
Consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill.
That all men and women are created equal.
Give me liberty or give me death.
Nobody's free until everybody's free.
The government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
History matters because it's not just about the past. History's about us, here and now. It explains the world we live in and why things are the way they are. And history gives us insights into how to achieve a more just, peaceful, and prosperous future. So people, let's do this. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to In the Past Lane, the podcast about American history and why it matters. I'm host Edward T. O'Donnell, your historian at large, and this is In the Past Lane, episode 56, in which we look at the fascinating stories of two Irish Americans you've probably never heard of. That's right, it's our annual St. Patrick's Day episode. We are coming to you this week from the Bugs Moran Studios, located in central Massachusetts. You can learn more about me, this podcast, and our guests at our website, inthepastlane.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Guiding us along, as always, is our lovely executive producer, Lulu Spencer. Hey, Lulu, what's the main course at the Spencer household for St. Patrick's Day?
Roasted leprechaun.
I have no idea why I just asked that question. Anyway, here at In the Past Lane, spring break is over. And I say spring break with air quotes because during that week, we received a foot of snow. And then this week, we got another 18 inches. So it's a New England spring. And I guess technically it's not spring until March 20th, so I guess I shouldn't complain. Even with the snow, signs of spring are still everywhere, with longer days and the sounds of birds chirping. In fact, I went outside at one point in the middle of the blizzard, and you could clearly hear birds chirping, so it was definitely a March snowstorm. That means it's only a matter of time until spring is here. Real spring. You know, the real nice sunny kind. At least that's what we tell ourselves here in central Massachusetts in the middle of March. In other news, we have 3 new patrons of the podcast. These are people who help out the podcast through monthly donations at Patreon. Thanks, Denise, Sam, and Howard. Your contributions really help us defray the costs associated with producing this podcast. And if you other listeners want to help us out, just go to the support button at our website, inthepastlane.com. It really helps. Thanks. Well, it's mid-March, so that means we need to roll out our annual St. Patrick's Day episode, wherein we examine something to do with Irish-American history. This time around, I've decided that it's time to explore the stories of 2 Irish Americans very few people remember, but who in their day were quite famous. One is William Joyce, who was known during World War II as Lord Haw Haw. And the other is Virginia Tighe, who in the late 1950s was also known as Bridey Murphy. Okay, people, finish up your green beer. It's time to get going. Your journey in the past lane begins now. Lord Haw Haw. Have you ever heard of him? Chances are, unless you're a really serious World War II buff, you haven't. Well, you'll have to take my word for it, that during World War II, Lord Haw Haw, a guy whose real name was William Joyce, was a big deal. That's because Joyce was the English-language voice of Nazi radio propaganda that was broadcast to Great Britain during the war. So who was this Irish American? And how did he end up in Germany? Well, the career of Lord Haw Haw Joyce is one of the most intriguing stories of World War II. Joyce was born in Brooklyn, that's right, the United States of America, in May of 1906, to an Irish father and an English mother. For reasons unknown, the family moved to Ireland in 1909, when William was just 3 years old. They eventually settled in Galway. And the Joyces became very successful financially. And they identified their political interests with the English crown, not the blossoming Irish nationalist movement and the effort to gain Ireland's independence. This may explain why the Joyces left Ireland for England in 1922, the year the Irish Free State was born. Well, the Joyces settled in England, and everything seemed normal for a while. William grew up and attended college at Birkbeck and graduated in 1927. But soon thereafter, he joined the British Union of Fascists and rose to become a trusted assistant of its founder, Sir William Moseley. Now, the rallies put on by the British Union of Fascists frequently resulted in clashes with the police and their political opponents, and Joyce was arrested on several occasions for assault. And if you Google him, you can see from his photo that he has an incredible scar on the right-hand side of his face from some of these physical altercations. In 1937, Joyce broke with Moseley to found the National Socialist League, a more stridently pro-Hitler fascist organization. When World War II broke out in early September 1939, agents of the British Secret Service, now empowered to arrest Nazi sympathizers, went to apprehend Joyce, only to find that he'd fled to Germany to offer his services to none other than Joseph Goebbels, head of Nazi propaganda. It was only a few weeks later, when on September 18, 1939, the people of Britain heard for the first time Joyce's signature opening, "Germany calling, Germany calling." What followed was the first of hundreds of Nazi propaganda broadcasts, touting the unstoppable advance of Hitler's legions and urging the people of Britain to see the futility of opposing them, and to see the wisdom of fascism. The goal of these broadcasts was to undermine the morale of the British people and the soldiers in the field. In one typical example, after a massive bombing in Cologne in Germany by the British Air Force in 1942, Winston Churchill warned Germany that they could expect more of the same hell. Joyce responded by claiming, quote, "The German attitude is, give us more hell, as much as you can, and we shall repay the hell with interest." 1 year later, in 1943, he predicted that, quote, "German victory is certain. The German people know that while many blows are yet to be struck, the final blow will be struck by Adolf Hitler." In recognition of his service to the Third Reich, Joyce was awarded the Cross of War Merit, First Class, in August 1944. At this point, it's worth asking, what impact did William Joyce, or Lord Haw Haw, have in Great Britain? Well, throughout Great Britain, William Joyce infuriated people. They saw him as an unforgivable traitor. And yet, they also found him ridiculous, even entertaining. His manner of speaking was sneering and condescending and exceedingly highbrow. In fact, there was something a little too House of Lords to his speech.
Germany calling, Germany calling, Germany calling. One would describe as the height of cynicism the message sent by the First Lord of the Admiralty to the captain of the British destroyer Cossack, congratulating him on his gallant rescue efforts. Only a person of Mr. Churchill's mentality could congratulate anybody, first on shooting unarmed men, and secondly, on flagrantly violating Norwegian neutrality.
Basically, people detected he was a fraud. He was a guy trying to sound like he was upper class. And it was pretty early on when he got his derisive nickname, Lord Haw Haw. Well, eventually, Joyce's predictions of German victory proved wrong. And so he delivered his last broadcast on April 30th, 1945, the same day that Hitler committed suicide, and then he put on a disguise and headed for Denmark. He was eventually approached by British soldiers at the border. After some casual conversation, one of the soldiers whispered to the other, "That sounds a lot like Lord Haw Haw." When they confronted him, Haw Haw tried to pull a gun, but they were faster. They disarmed him and arrested him and put him on a transport to London. And when he arrived, Joyce was charged with high treason. News of Lord Haw Haw's arrest was big news in Great Britain. Let's give a listen to the BBC report of his capture.
At Lüneburg, Germany, a picture of Lady Haw Haw, William Joyce's wife, or at any rate the woman he was living with. And William Joyce himself, alias Lord Haw Haw. wounded when captured and now not looking his best, perhaps in pajamas. No doubt he'll try to prove he's technically not a traitor, but the British people know the answer to that. Germany calling, Germany calling.
Well, when the trial began, Joyce denied the charge of treason, noting that he was a citizen of the United States, not Britain. British prosecutors, however, produced a British passport that Joyce had received in 1939. It was still valid during the first 10 months of his Nazi broadcasts. And the passport carried with it an obligation of loyalty to the crown. At least that's what the prosecutors alleged. And here's an important detail. Joyce had received that passport by lying about his place of birth. He claimed Galway instead of Brooklyn, New York. And we should point out here that Galway is a place in Ireland, and Ireland at the time of Joyce's birth was still technically part of Great Britain. Hadn't gained its independence yet. Further evidence indicated that Joyce had become a German citizen in 1940. Well, when the trial concluded, the jury deliberated for only 23 minutes. Joyce was found guilty of high treason and sentenced to hang. Appeals by his attorneys, including a final one before the House of Lords, were all rejected. The same was true of appeals to the Truman administration to intervene on his behalf since he was an American citizen. On January 3rd, 1946, William Joyce, a.k.a. Lord Haw Haw, was hanged in the yard of London's Wandsworth Prison. No one recorded his last words. There are two postscripts to this story that are worth noting. First, Joyce's trial and execution remain very controversial to this day. I'll post some links to our show page. You can read more about that. And second, Joyce's descendants had his remains removed from Great Britain and reburied in Galway, Ireland in 1976.
You are listening to In the Past Lane, the podcast about history and why it matters.
If you hadn't heard of Lord Haw Haw, I'm guessing you probably haven't ever heard of Bridey Murphy and the reincarnation sensation she triggered in 1956. It all started at a dinner party on November 29, 1952 in Colorado. A man named Morey Bernstein, who was an amateur hypnotist, asked if anyone was willing to undergo hypnosis. Basically, Bernstein was about to do a parlor trick. But he actually believed that hypnosis held all sorts of potential for human betterment, and maybe something more mysterious. What believers in reincarnation called past life regression. A woman at the party named Virginia Tighe agreed to let Bernstein hypnotize her. As the party guests watched in wonder, Virginia lay down on the couch and soon slipped into a deep hypnotic trance. Bernstein believed that through the power of hypnosis, he could lead a person back through time and into a previous life. To his delight, and no doubt everyone at the party, Virginia soon told him that she had previously been Bridey Murphy, an Irish woman living between 1798 and 1864. As she recounted her previous life, she spoke in a thick Irish brogue and provided vividly detailed descriptions of her days in Ireland. Bernstein and that small audience in that Colorado living room were stunned and amazed. So who was this guy, Morey Bernstein? Well, he hailed from Pueblo, Colorado. He grew up in a prosperous Jewish-American family and went on to inherit the family business of selling heavy machinery, farm equipment, and plumbing supplies. For all intents and purposes, his life as a wealthy businessman in post-war Pueblo, Colorado was unexceptional. But then one day in the late 1940s, he witnessed a friend perform hypnosis at a party. And Bernstein was hooked, and he went on to become an avid amateur hypnotist. He read every book on the subject and took every opportunity to practice hypnosis on his friends. At first, it was just a party gag. But with time and deeper study, Bernstein came to believe that hypnosis had the power to cure ailments like stuttering and insomnia. And the more he read, the more he believed that hypnosis might be the key that could unlock the mysteries of the subconscious, maybe even into a person's previous lives. And who was Virginia Tighe? Well, she was a 27-year-old homemaker. Her husband owned a local car dealership, and they had 2 children. What put her in the spotlight was her willingness, at that party in November 1952, to give it a go. To lie down on that couch and let Bernstein hypnotize her. Keep your eye on the candle flame, Bernstein instructed her on that night. You will fall into a deeper and deeper sleep. He then instructed her to regress to age 7 and answer a few questions. Pleased with her responses, he pushed her further back, to 5, then 3, and finally to the age of 1. Then came the moment of truth. In a moment, Bernstein hoped, he'd learn if it was possible to push Virginia back even further, into her previous life. I want you to keep going back and back in your mind, he told her. Keep going until you find yourself in some other scene at some other time. Several minutes later, he asked, "How old are you?" 8, replied Tighe. "Do you know what year it is?" he continued. 1806. "What is your name?" he prodded. Bridey Murphy. What followed in this and 4 subsequent hypnosis sessions was an astonishing set of alleged interviews with 19th century Bridey Murphy through mid-20th century Virginia Tighe. In a convincing Irish brogue, she told Bernstein she'd been born in Ireland in County Cork in 1798 to one Duncan Murphy, a barrister, and Kathleen Murphy. At the age of 17, she said, she married a man named Sean Bryan McCarthy. They eventually settled in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, where she died in 1864. Virginia, or Bridey, remembered that she had died from a fall down a flight of stairs, and that in death she had watched her own funeral from the great beyond. Throughout this and 3 subsequent sessions, she added a mountain of detail about her life in Ireland, names of neighbors, local businesses, important events, and folk stories. When Bernstein prompted her, she sang Irish songs and even danced an Irish jig. And all of this from a woman who had never set foot in Ireland. The story of Bridey Murphy soon reached the public through a series of articles published in the Denver Post in 1954. These in turn led Bernstein to secure a book deal that led to the publication of The Quest for Bridey Murphy. This book became an international sensation. Some people were drawn to the story because of its air of the occult, sorcery, and reincarnation. But others were fascinated because Bernstein's use of hypnosis suggested that it potentially was a major scientific discovery. Either way, the public was fascinated. Bernstein's book topped the New York Times bestseller for 26 weeks, and eventually it was translated into 30 languages and sold worldwide. A recording of the hypnosis sessions sold 30,000 copies.
What is your name?
Bridey.
Your name is what?
Bridey.
Don't you have any other name?
Bridey Murphy.
And where do you live?
I live in Cork.
And what is the name of your mother?
Kathleen.
And what is the name of your father?
Duncan Murphy.
Before long, there was a hit song and then a feature film, The Search for Bridey Murphy. I mean, can we just all take a moment here to appreciate Morey Bernstein's extraordinary marketing? He published his book, inspired a hit song, and got a movie deal, all in 1 year, 1956. Okay, back to the story. As the Bridey Murphy mania grew, journalists began to investigate the details of the story. For example, researchers in Belfast turned up the names of 2 grocers named Farr and Corrigan in an 1865 directory, names that matched those mentioned by Bridey. But then again, those were pretty common names in Ireland. Still, here and there, other tantalizing clues suggested her story might be true. When no one could turn up a birth certificate or any direct evidence of a Bridey Murphy in Cork or Belfast, those who wanted the story to be true explained it away, arguing that such records in early 1800s Ireland often didn't exist, or they were simply lost. But investigative journalists from the Chicago American newspaper eventually uncovered the most likely source of Virginia Tighe's memory. It turned out that when Tighe was a child, there was a woman named Bridey Murphy Corkle who lived across the street. This Bridey, a real Bridey, had indeed been born in Ireland, and she loved to tell stories about the old sod to her neighbors. It seems very likely that Tighe absorbed many of these Bridey recollections into her subconscious, only to have them unleashed through Bernstein's hypnosis. Further research revealed that Tighe had an aunt who often recited Irish folklore, and that in high school she'd learned to do an Irish jig. When these reports were published towards the end of 1956, many in the public denounced Bernstein and Tighe as conspirators in what appeared to be an elaborate hoax. Yet there is every indication that Bernstein was an honest man who simply allowed himself to believe what he wanted to believe, that hypnosis could facilitate past life regression. He was a wealthy businessman who didn't need any fame or money, and everyone knew he had become fascinated by hypnosis long before he met Virginia Tighe at that party. As for Virginia Tighe, she also seemed the least likely person to seek publicity or fame. For example, she refused to allow Bernstein to use her real name in his book. And she never sought out the media once the story blew up. Indeed, she once said of that party where she allowed Bernstein to hypnotize her, "If I had known what was going to happen, I would never have lain down on that couch." So, how to explain what happened when Virginia Tighe underwent hypnosis at that party? Experts in hypnosis today consider Tighe's recollections, such as they were, to be a classic case of what's termed cryptomnesia, a condition where a person recalls a memory but believes it's something new and original. In other words, under hypnosis, Virginia Tighe most likely recalled the memories of her neighbor, Bridey Murphy Corkle, and the stories that she told. But when she recalled them, she believed these to be new memories, something she'd never known about, something from a past life excavated through hypnosis. Well, like many a media sensation, the Bridey Murphy story faded by 1957. Maury Bernstein, the hypnotist, returned to the quiet life of running his business. He sold it in 1970 and used the profits to make a fortune on Wall Street. He then became a major philanthropist, and he died in 1999. Virginia Tighe likewise dropped out of sight and resumed her quiet life as a typical post-war American homemaker. She died in 1995. By then, the Bridey Murphy story was nothing but a distant memory for most Americans. A short-lived thrill that now resided alongside subsequent paranormal fads like UFOs, Bigfoot, killer bees, and the Bermuda Triangle. Just a little bit of unintentional blarney that went big in 1956. Okay, people, that's all for this episode of In the Past Lane. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to this podcast at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you access your podcasts. And tell your friends about In the Past Lane. That really helps to bring in new listeners. For more information about the many things we talked about today, head over to our show page for this episode at inthepastlane.com. I also want to hear from you, so please send us your comments, questions, and suggestions via Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook page. I'm In the Past Lane's host, Edward T. O'Donnell, your historian at large, reminding you that history explains our world. So let's pay attention to it. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us next time for another journey in the Past Lane. Hey Lulu, word is you learned Irish step dance as a kid. Ready to give us a demo?
Hold my mixing board.
SBI, Snoring Beagle International.